Section 16.3 Circulatory and Respiratory Systems. By the end of this section, you will be able to describe the passage of air from the outside environment to the lungs, describe the function of the circulatory system, describe the cardiac cycle, and explain how blood flows through the body. Animals are complex multicellular organisms that require a mechanism for transporting nutrients throughout their bodies and removing waste. The human circulatory system has a complex network of blood vessels that reach all parts of the body. This extensive network supplies the cells, tissues, and organs with oxygen and nutrients, and removes carbon dioxide and waste compounds. The medium for transport of gases and other molecules is the blood, which continually circulates through the system. Pressure differences within the system cause the movement of the blood and are created by the pumping of the heart. Gas exchange between tissues and the blood is an essential function of the circulatory system. In humans, other mammals, and birds, blood absorbs oxygen and releases carbon dioxide in the lungs. Thus, the circulatory and respiratory system, whose function is to obtain oxygen and discharge carbon dioxide, work in tandem. The respiratory system. Take a breath in and hold it. Wait several seconds and then let it out. Humans, when they are not exerting themselves, breathe approximately 15 times per minute on average. This equates to about 900 breaths an hour, or 21,600 breaths per day. With every inhalation, air fills the lungs, and with every exhalation, it rushes back out. That air is doing more than just inflating and deflating the lungs in the chest cavity. The air contains oxygen that crosses the lung tissue, enters the bloodstream, and travels to organs and tissues. There, oxygen is exchanged for carbon dioxide, which is a cellular waste material. Carbon dioxide exits the cells, enters the bloodstream, travels back to the lungs, and is expired out of the body during exhalation. Breathing is both a voluntary and an involuntary event. How often a breath is taken and how much air is inhaled or exhaled is regulated by the respiratory center in the brain in response to signals it receives about the carbon dioxide content of the blood. However, it is possible to override this automatic regulation for activities such as speaking, singing, and swimming underwater. During inhalation, the diaphragm descends, creating a negative pressure around the lungs, and they begin to inflate, drawing in air from outside the body. The air enters the body through the nasal cavity, located just inside the nose. As the air passes through the nasal cavity, the air is warmed to body temperature and humidified by moisture from mucous membranes. These processes help equilibrate the air to the body conditions, reducing any damage that cold, dry air can cause. Particulate matter that is floating in the air is removed in the nasal passages by hairs, mucus, and cilia. Air is also chemically sampled by the sense of smell. From the nasal cavity, air passes through the pharynx, the throat, and the larynx, the voice box, as it makes its way to the trachea. The main function of the trachea is to funnel the inhaled air to the lungs and the exhaled air back out of the body. The human trachea is a cylinder, about 25 to 30 centimeters, or 9.8 to 11.8 inches long, which sits in front of the esophagus and extends from the pharynx into the chest cavity to the lungs. It is made of incomplete rings of cartilage and smooth muscle. The cartilage provides strength and support to the trachea to keep the passage open. The trachea is lined with cells that have cilia and secrete mucus. The mucus catches particles that have been inhaled, and the cilia move the particles toward the pharynx. The end of the trachea divides into two bronchi that enter the right and left lung. Air enters the lungs through the primary bronchi. The primary bronchus divides, creating smaller and smaller diameter bronchi until the passages are under 1 millimeter in diameter, when they are called bronchioles, as they split and spread through the lung. Like the trachea, the bronchus and bronchioles are made of cartilage and smooth muscle. Bronchi are innervated by nerves of both the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems that control muscle contraction, parasympathetic, or relaxation, sympathetic. in the bronchi and bronchioles, depending on the nervous system's cues. The final bronchioles are the respiratory bronchioles. Alveolar ducts are attached to the end of each respiratory bronchiole. At the end of each duct are alveolar sacs, each containing 20 to 30 alveoli. Gas exchange occurs only in the alveoli. The alveoli are thin-walled and look like tiny bubbles within the sacs. The alveoli are in direct contact with the capillaries of the circulatory system. Such intimate contact ensures that oxygen will diffuse from the alveoli into the blood. In addition, carbon dioxide will diffuse from the blood into the alveoli to be exhaled. The anatomical arrangement of capillaries and alveoli emphasizes the structural and functional relationship of the respiratory and circulatory systems. Estimates for the surface area of alveoli in the lungs vary around 100 meters squared. This large area is about the area of half a tennis court. This large surface area, combined with the thin-walled nature of the alveolar cells, allows gases to easily diffuse across the cells. Figure 16.9. Air enters the respiratory system through the nasal cavity and then passes through the pharynx and the trachea into the lungs. The circulatory system. The circulatory system is a network of vessels, the arteries, veins, and capillaries, and a pump, the heart. In all vertebrate organisms, this is a closed-loop system in which the blood is largely separated from the body's other extracellular fluid compartment, the interstitial fluid, which is the fluid bathing the cells. Blood circulates inside blood vessels and circulates unidirectionally from the heart around one of two circulatory routes, then returns to the heart again. This is a closed circulatory system. Open circulatory systems are found in invertebrate animals in which the circulatory fluid bathes the internal organs directly, even though it may be moved about without or with a pumping heart. The heart. The heart is a complex muscle that consists of two pumps, one that pumps blood through pulmonary circulation to the lungs, and the other that pumps blood through systemic circulation to the rest of the body's tissues and the heart itself. The heart is asymmetrical, with the left side being larger than the right side, correlating with the different sizes of the pulmonary and systemic circuits. In humans, the heart is about the size of a clenched fist. It is divided into four chambers, two atria and two ventricles. There is one atrium and one ventricle on the right side, and one atrium and one ventricle on the left side. The right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the systemic circulation through the major veins. The superior vena cava, which drains blood from the head and from the veins that come from the arms, as well as the inferior vena cava, which drains blood from the veins that come from the lower organs and the legs. This deoxygenated blood then passes to the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve, which prevents the backflow of blood. After it is filled, the right ventricle contracts, pumping the blood to the lungs for reoxygenation. The left atrium receives the oxygen-rich blood from the lungs. This blood passes through the bicuspid valve to the left ventricle, where the blood is pumped into the aorta. The aorta is the major artery of the body, taking oxygenated blood to the organs and muscles of the body. This pattern of pumping is referred to as double circulation and is found in all mammals. Figure 16.10. The heart is divided into four chambers, two atria and two ventricles. Each chamber is separated by one-way valves. The right side of the heart receives deoxygenated blood from the body and pumps it to the lungs. The left side of the heart pumps blood to the rest of the body. The cardiac cycle. The main purpose of the heart is to pump blood through the body. It does so in a repeating sequence called the cardiac cycle. The cardiac cycle is the flow of blood through the heart coordinated by electrochemical signals that cause the heart muscle to contract and relax. In each cardiac cycle, a sequence of contractions pushes out the blood, pumping it through the body. This is followed by a relaxation phase where the heart fills with blood. These two phases are called the systole, contraction, and diastole, relaxation, respectively. The signal for contraction begins at the location on the outside of the right atrium. The electrochemical signal moves from there across the atria, causing them to contract. The contraction of the atria forces blood through the valves into the ventricles. Closing of these valves, caused by the contraction of the ventricles, produces a lub sound. The signal has, by this time, passed down the walls of the heart through a point between the right atrium and right ventricle. The signal then causes the ventricles to contract. The ventricles contract together, forcing blood into the aorta and the pulmonary arteries. Closing of the valves to these arteries, caused by the blood being drawn back toward the heart during ventricular relaxation, produces a monosyllabic dub sound. Figure 16.11. In each cardiac cycle, a series of contractions and relaxations pumps blood through the heart and through the body. A. During cardiac diastole, blood flows into the heart while all the chambers are relaxed. B. Then the ventricles remain relaxed while atrial systole pushes blood into the ventricles. C. Once the atria relax again, ventricle systole pushes blood out of the heart. The pumping of the heart is a function of the cardiac muscle cells, or cardiomyocytes, that make up the heart muscle. Cardiomyocytes are distinctive muscle cells that are striated like skeletal muscle, but pump rhythmically and involuntarily like smooth muscle. Adjacent cells are connected by intercalated discs found only in cardiac muscle. These connections allow the electrical signals to travel directly to neighboring muscle cells. The electrical impulses in the heart produce electrical currents that flow through the body and can be measured on the skin using electrodes. This information can be observed as an electrocardiogram, or ECG, a recording of the electrical impulses of the cardiac muscle. Blood vessels. The blood from the heart is carried through the body by a complex network of blood vessels. Arteries take blood away from the heart. The main artery of the systemic circulation is the aorta. It branches into major arteries that take blood to different limbs and organs. The aorta and arteries near the heart have heavy but elastic walls that respond to and smooth out the pressure differences caused by the beating heart. Arteries further away from the heart have more muscle tissue in their walls that can constrict to affect flow rates of blood. The major arteries diverge into minor arteries and then smaller vessels called arterioles to reach more deeply into the muscles and organs of the body. Arterioles diverge into capillary beds. Capillary beds contain a large number, tens to hundreds of capillaries that branch among the cells of the body. Capillaries are narrow diameter tubes that can fit single red blood cells and are the site for the exchange of nutrients, waste, and oxygen with tissues at the cellular level. Fluid also leaks from the blood into the interstitial space from the capillaries. The capillaries converge again into venules that connect to minor veins that finally connect to major veins. Veins are blood vessels that bring blood high in carbon dioxide back to the heart. Veins are not as thick-walled as arteries, since pressure is lower, and they have valves along their length that prevent backflow of blood away from the heart. The major veins draw blood from the same organs and limbs as the major arteries supply. Figure 16.12. The arteries of the body, indicated in red, start at the aortic arch and branch to supply the organs and muscles of the body with oxygenated blood. The veins of the body, indicated in blue, return blood to the heart. The pulmonary arteries are blue to reflect the fact that they are deoxygenated, and the pulmonary veins are red to reflect that they are oxygenated.